you heard of the Hearach? If not, you're about to find out there's much more to this island than Harris Tweed and Sugar Kelp Gin. We're going to talk about the first two releases from the Isle of Harris Distillery. My name is Matt. This is Whiskey on the West Coast. The Isle of Harris is located in the Outer Hebrides along Scotland's west coast, just northwest of the Isle of Skye. And much like other small island communities in Scotland, Harris has suffered from a long-term decline in population. Since 1951, the population of Harris has actually declined roughly by half. The distillery itself, though, is located on an isthmus in the village of Tarbert, and Tarbert itself actually means portage or crossing point. And to my understanding, that this part of the island is actually a place where there would be a portage where they'd haul a boat across to actually shorten a journey to the other side of the island, which is actually pretty interesting. Built in 2015, the Harris Distillery has become quite a focal point in the community. It was set up to be a social distillery, one that's there to provide employment not only to those who call Harris home, but in particular to the young people who simply just cannot afford to stay without meaningful work. In 2015, 10 people initially were employed at the distillery, and today they employ over 50 permanent staff, which is quite remarkable. It's a significant employer in this island community of just about 2,000 people. Until the fall of 2023, the Harris Distillery was probably better known for their sugar kelp infused gin, and the gin admittedly is excellent. It's probably my favorite gin along with the Botanist from Bruichladdich. However, it helped the distillery bide their time while their whiskey slumbered in oak. But the distillery really was always meant to focus on whiskey. And perhaps that's part of the reason they were actually able to wait a few years more before they released their first whiskey, to let it mature a bit more before putting out their Inaugural. The distillery itself has a capacity of just about 4 million liters per annum. However, to my understanding, it's only producing about half that, 200,000 liters per annum at present. Fermentation times at the distillery can vary greatly from 70 hours to 120 hours due to the fact that there actually is an observance of the Sabbath in this island community. Now, at the Victoria Whiskey Festival, I actually took in the Isle of Harris Masterclass that was hosted by the International Business Development Manager for the Isle of Harris, Peter Kwasniewski. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, but he had actually traveled all the way from the Isle of Harris to Vancouver Island here in British Columbia, Canada, to host this masterclass and to tell us all about the distillery. So thank you so much, Peter, for coming all this way. But one thing I learned in that is that when it comes to fermentation, overall, 40% of their spirit has a 3-day fermentation, whereas the other 60% of it gets a 5-day fermentation in Oregon pine washbacks. Furthermore to this, the spirit still that they use at the Isle of Harris actually makes use of a purifier on its line arm for increased reflux during distillation. Those line arms, I've been told, actually have a downward angle, and the whiskey, once it is actually set to be bottled, goes through a marrying period of about 12 weeks. The whiskey itself is all aged on the Isle of Harris and it's also bottled on the Isle of Harris. Some things that aren't necessarily the case with other distilleries, like say Talisker, for example. Finally, there is spirit laid away on the Isle of Harris in their warehouses using Scottish barley that's been kiln dried with local peat, and it's actually a heavier peated spirit than the typical Isle of Harris spirit. That's usually around 12 to 15 ppm. It's around 30 ppm. This is likely to be for very limited future releases and special releases, possibly only distillery only releases. However, I first learned about this, not in the masterclass, though it did come up. I learned about it in this lovely information pamphlet that comes in the packaging here. Let's talk a little bit about the packaging. Number one, this booklet is phenomenal. There's a lot in here, a lot of cool facts and details about the distillery. The box itself, it looks fantastic. The design for the bottle as well as the box, it's all from Stranger & Stranger, who does the designs, as you might already know, for brands like Compass Box, and they have gorgeous labels and bottle designs, and it's no different here. This box is gorgeous. It shows some of the rock formations that you get on the island. However, this box is really flimsy. Mine broke almost immediately. The only good things about the box were the fact that I got that pamphlet, and at the bottom there was this actually kind of handy Isle of Harris coaster. So that's pretty cool actually. I'll probably use that. What's more, this bottle here, I've been told as I pick it up, there's these lines on the bottle, both vertical and horizontal, and when it catches the light in the right way, it kind of forms a crisscross pattern, almost as if you're stitching tweed. And of course, you know, knitting tweed. Harris is famous for its Harris tweed. That's one of the big industries there. One of the things it's known around the world for. And this is supposed to show kind of like that stitch that binds that tweed together. It's supposed to be represented here on this bottle with that. It's a cool bottle design. There's some really nice like indentations for where your fingers go. The cork is awesome. The information on the strap on the label here is great. It tells me the cask types. Really, really great bottle design. But enough about that. Let's move on to the first release from the Isle of Harris, the Hearach. The Hearach, first release from the Isle of Harris Distillery. It's Island Single Malt Scotch Whisky. This is from their first batch. This is batch 000423. I'm just going to refer to it as batch 4 from that inaugural first release. There was 8 batches total in the fall of 2023, and I believe each batch was about 11,000 bottles. So that's nearly 90,000 bottles in an inaugural release. That's one way to make sure that everyone that wants a bottle can get their hands on it. So that's actually a cool way to handle it, because I don't think the punters throwing bottles to auctions and trying to get something that's going to be worth a lot of money, I don't think they really they were able to actually make the money they were hoping, and more people who want to actually drink the whiskey were able to get bottles in their hands. The age of this whiskey is 5 years old minimum is what it states. 46% ABV, non-chill filtered natural color. The cask composition, this is 85% ex-bourbon casks. Of those ex-bourbon casks, 64% are Buffalo Trace casks and 21% are Heaven Hill casks. Now, I was told in my masterclass, those are transported whole. They aren't like broken down and then rebuilt once they get into Scotland. They are shipped whole and then used at the distillery, which is a more expensive process because you can't ship them as efficiently. But I've been told it delivers better results in the whiskey. So 85% ex-bourbon casks, then you got 11% Oloroso casks and 4% Fino Sherry casks. The peating level, the phenol level on this is 12.9 ppm on grain phenols. Again, 11,545 bottles in this batch, and this retails for about $115 to $150 Canadian. The Isle of Harris first release, the Hearach, batch 4 2023. Let's check out the nose on this whiskey in my trusty Victoria Whiskey Festival glass, no less. Oh man, okay. On the nose immediately, it's lemon, lime, and this salt sprays. It's immediately coastal. There's like the fizzy bottle cap candies, if you're familiar with those, and boiled sweets. It's sweet, it's coastal. That citrus is nice. It's very on those like chalky like rockets or fun dip candies. Again, a lot of candy notes, a lot of sweetness. But that like notable coastal vibe is really lovely. That's one of the things, like I love that profile of whiskey. When I find it even in young whiskey, it's super enjoyable. Yeah, it's coastal, it's mineralic. I'm getting like wet rocks. There's some like light florals in this too, paired up with some, yeah, like honey sweetness. So I mean, florals and honey makes me think of like Manuka honey. And woven all throughout this in this Hearach first release is this like light, earthy wisp of smoke. The peat smoke inclusion here gives this a lot more complexity. It feels like it's really adding to a chorus of aromas that are just friggin' lovely. Yeah. If I really push this nose, like I can pick up like maybe some stone fruits in it, like something along the lines of like a light peach or apricot, but I might be really pushing it with that. So let's move on to the palate. Slunge. Once again, immediately coastal, but with way more peat influence on the palate, on the front end of the palate, and into the mid palate and finish than there was on the nose. The nose was hiding that peat a bit more, but it's present on the palate. But obviously with that, the peating level at 12.9 ppm, 12 to 15, I think is what they said is average. It's allowing other things to show up too, which is lovely. Oh man, another sip. Okay, like sweet orchard fruits. That citrus and lemon lime sort of combination I was getting on the nose, it's present on the palate too. There's like if you're in Canada, if you ever had like a crunchy bar, like sponge toffee in the UK, I think is what it's called. That sort of vibe. When I'm talking orchard fruit, I'm talking like maybe apples. There's a bit of spice to it. It's apple, cinnamon. That gives me sort of apple pie vibes, but without the crust. So I'll just leave it at apples and cinnamon as opposed to apple pie. Those candies I talked about in the nose, they're still on the palate, more on boiled sweets, but it's bright, it's fairly coastal, and again, that light florality, like light floral notes. Florality, is that a word? Those light floral notes, along with really nice smoke that's not just like blowing you out of the water. There's nuance to it. Man, I'm loving this palette. The finish is not exactly long, but there's enough complexity in it that, like, man, it makes me want to just continue on with this whiskey. The peat like shows up here the most. That's where I'm getting the most like sort of residual phenols. It's smoldering a bit. There's that kind of crescendo at the near the end. Yeah, the peat hangs out for a bit. There's a bit of sweetness, but that's actually kind of drawing me back into wanting to take another sip. So if you can't tell, I'm really enjoying this whiskey. And if you look at the bottle level, I've been taking my time to get to know this bottle for quite a while. Maybe I'm nearing the 2/3 mark in this bottle, heading towards the halfway mark. It's actually very quick for me with whiskey because I tend to drink things quite slowly. This is subtle, not showy whiskey. It's not trying to hide youth behind like a whack ton of peat, heavy cask influence, or say like high ABV, like a cask strength whiskey. This invites you to take your time with it, to take your time with every sip, and to really get to know the Harris spirit character and the house style a bit. I'm really digging this. They made an exceptionally wise decision not to release this whiskey at 3 years old, to wait until it had a couple extra years of maturity on it before releasing it. It's like so many others have made the mistake doing. This is a phenomenal first entry into the Scotch whiskey landscape, and I can only think of maybe one or two other inaugural releases that I've tried that are up to the challenge that this one lays out. I'm not at the point where I'm saying this is the best inaugural I've ever had. That might go to another distillery, but this is freaking good stuff, guys. I'm gonna wait to give a score at the end after I try the second release from the Isle of Harris Distillery, their Oloroso Sherry Cask Matured. On to the Hearach Oloroso Cask Matured, second release from the Isle of Harris Distillery. Again, Island Single Malt Scotch Whisky, second release, 4 batches total is my understanding. I do not know which batch I have here. It was released in the fall of 2024, 1 year after that first release came out, and there is a 6 years of age minimum, 1 year older than the minimum age on that first release, so 5 years old, so it's aged up a year. That's pretty cool. 46% ABV, non-chill filtered natural color, entirely matured in Oloroso Butts, 500 liter butts. all of which were sourced from the bodega Jose and Miguel Martin. The peating level is 12.9 ppm, so same phenols level on grain as the first release. And it retails for about $130 to $160 a bottle, so a little bit more expensive than that first release. You will notice I have a full bottle over here of the Isle of Harris first release. I purchased that with my own hard-earned cash. However, I was sent a sample of the second Oloroso Cask matured release. So I want to make sure you guys are aware that I did receive this sample for free to provide in a review or a side-by-side. And I figured it was worth it to be able to give you a glimpse at both, but keep that in mind. All right, Isle of Harris second release, Oloroso Casks matured. First thing I noticed about this, and I absolutely friggin' love, is the fact that it's still coastal. It's still mineralic. Like the first, there's still a bit of citrus coming through on that, in my opinion, like a little touch of it, which means I feel like the Harris distillate character, the signature, is still coming through, especially with those coastal notes. Like, that is exactly what I was hoping for, that it wasn't just like slathered in sherry. And I think you can see from the color, it doesn't look like a sherry bomb. So really happy with those first reports. Man, on the nose, cinnamon, like perhaps nutmeg, maybe like dried fruits for sure, and a touch of maybe like licorice. Dried fruits, absolutely, and like ginger chews, like ginger candy chews. There's a sour cherry note. When I'm thinking about fruits, that's where my mind's going, is to the cherry. I'm thinking Oloroso, I'm thinking like a certain nuttiness and raisin, and I'm finding that here. Yeah. There's like a cola note. And something herbal I can't really pin down, but man, one thing I am noticing is the peat smoke is like tamed way down compared to the first. Way more subtle on the peat smoke on the nose than on the first release. I'm going to attribute that to probably the sherry casks. I found that in a number of different other releases, the sherry cask just happens to round it and drown that peat note out a bit more. But yeah, I'm liking the sour cherry, the dried fruits, the cola note, the ginger, bit of spice, but especially the fact that it's still got those coastal notes, those coastal vibes, a bit of a mineralic note. I'm not so certain on that citrus anymore. That might not be there. But yeah, no, liking that nose a lot. All right, to the palate. Slunge, guys. Oak spice and orange zest. Tobacco. Those ginger chews show up on the palate as well. Yeah, I'm liking that tobacco. There's dried fruits again, bit of spice and like clove, perhaps like a sandalwood note too. I'm liking the wood notes. I'm liking the spice, the darker sort of fruit notes, which is a bit different than the first release. Okay. Unlike the first, on the nose, I mentioned that I was looking for nuts on the nose because Oloroso Casks, I think, nutty, along with all those great fruit notes and earthy notes that come along with it. Walnut, like a walnut liqueur note. Getting that on the palate. So while it wasn't on the nose, it's here on the palate. That's a really nice note. Really loving that. Yeah. On the back of the palate and into the finish, I can still pick up on those like coastal notes, almost like that like chalky candy note, the mineralic vibes from the first release, which is nice. Again, that's present. The distillate characters pulling through into the palate as well. What I haven't mentioned yet, though, is the peat. The peat smoke is just dialed way down, as opposed to that first release, which I'm actually missing a little bit. I'm missing that peat, not being quite as present. It's much more subtle, and it really takes a back seat on this Oloroso cask matured. Another sip here. Cola notes, once again, that's really cool. Really enjoying that. On the finish, like cigar, like dregs, like the end of like a long drag on a cigar. Like cigar shadow effect, if you will, too, like at the very end of it. That peat is a bit more present in that finish than on the nose or the palate for me. Again, missing the peat a little bit, but super complex, really well orchestrated sherried dram. This is not about cask tech, this whiskey. It's not a sherry bomb, and if that's what you're here for, this second release from the Isle of Harris will probably disappoint you, because it's not a sherry bomb. It's not Glenallachie 12 or 15 or Glendronach 18-year-old. It's nothing like those. It's really more nuanced, and it's a showcase of how well blended it is as a single malt, and what a well blended single malt can do in harmony with Oloroso casks. No one element takes over in this whiskey, which is awesome. Again, it adds to that, just like that deft balance. I do think I missed the more present peat from the first release, as I've mentioned, but this is really well balanced, really well poised, to get us all acquainted with the different sides and different aspects of the Harris Single Malt whiskey. I'm really loving this as well. Both of these whiskeys, honestly, have been expertly blended by Shauna McLeod, the lead blender, the master blender at the Isle of Harris Distillery. So well done there. Scores. Where am I going with scores here? I do have to say, I think I have a more passionate feeling towards the first release. I just love that type of whiskey, and the more present peat just makes it a more complete whiskey for me. The complexity on that first release, I think, is phenomenal. But this is the third time I've had this Oloroso cask matured. Actually, a fourth. I had it twice at the Victoria Whiskey Festival, and I've had 2 glasses out of this sample. Man, oh man. I come back to it, I'm liking it more and more. I think it started around an 85 out of 100 for me, and it's been creeping up. So what am I going to do for scores here? I'm going to give the first release for the Isle of Harris a score of 88 out of 100, which is a phenomenal score for a 5-year-old single malt inaugural release. 88 out of 100. For the Oloroso cask matured Hearach, I'm going to give that an 87, just a step below. I was flirting more with an 86. Honestly, if anything, I might like 86.5, and I make the rules. I could give it a 0.5, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. For now, it's an 87 out of 100. I am enjoying both of these whiskeys quite a bit. I would love to pick up a bottle of the Oloroso cask matured. I think it's a phenomenal whiskey. Right now, I want to ask you guys, have you had any of these whiskeys from the Isle of Harris? Have you had the Hearach? I had a couple single casks from ex-bourbon casks, Buffalo Trace and Heaven Hill cask. Honestly, I'm really excited for the future of this distillery. Not just the ethic of what they're doing in their community, for their community, the way this distillery is set up. I'm loving the whiskey itself. The look, the marketing shouldn't come into it so much, but man, it feels like they're doing absolutely everything right. Well done, Harris. Well done. I think your community is being well represented by this whiskey on the global stage. Guys, let me know in the comments if you've had these, if you've enjoyed the Hearach releases from the Isle of Harris Distillery. Thank you so much to my Patreon subscribers, guys. Your support means a lot to me. I've filmed some Patreon videos on this night, batch recordings, so watch out for those. And until next time, guys, from the West Coast, slàinte.